Hey everyone, Jake here from CVP. Today we are taking a look at Zeiss's newest series of cinema lenses. These are the Nano Primes, a mirrorless mount set of cinema primes firmly aimed at filmmakers wanting image quality inspired by the Supremes in a compact, neat housing at a fraction of the price. But how do they perform? And should you be considering them for your next lens purchase or rental? Well, let's take a look. Zeiss are legendary in the optical and cinema industries. Their history in cinema began with the planar in 1896, and since then they have developed so many historical lenses. This includes the mythical 50mm f/0.7 used by Kubrick, their legendary Super Speed series, their compact Ultra Primes and flawless Master Primes with Arri, and their current flagship Cine lenses, the Supremes, which are some of the most in-demand cinema primes on the rental market in the UK. And they've been used on productions like The Queen's Gambit, Talk to Me, Knives Out Glass Onion, Barbarian, and one of my favourite series from last year, Beef. We've been using Zeiss lenses for pretty much the entire time we've been creating these YouTube videos for CVP, with our go-tos being a set of Otus Primes and the Mirrorless 100mm f2.8 macro. The Otus are still some of our favourite lenses on the market and are great for the work that we do here. We managed to take a set of the Nano Primes out and film down near Dungeness, and to Holland & Holland's beautiful shooting ground to film some more real-world imagery. The look of the Nano Primes has definitely been influenced by the Supremes, which have become very sought after in the cinema space for their very neutral, clean, pleasing image. Thankfully, the image the Nano Primes produce are also very neutral and modern, while still having a pleasing character to them. You can definitely see some CA on some of these frames, but they do resolve well. Across our time shooting with the Nano Primes, we managed to shoot with them on 3 different Sony cameras, an FX6, Burano and Venice 2. And they behaved well across all 3 cameras. I think it's only natural to want to compare these new lenses to some of Zeiss's existing offerings, specifically the CP3s and Supremes. The CP3s and Nano Primes look incredibly similar, but the Nano Primes are a touch smaller, but not by loads. But because of the difference in flange depth between E and PL, the Nano Primes are smaller overall when on camera. On average, the Nano Primes are actually a little bit heavier than the CP3s, but lighter than their Supreme equivalents. But given that they have a much larger maximum aperture, it's impressive that they are still pretty compact. The Supremes, while still being decently compact for high-end cinema primes, look massive compared to the Nano Primes. But let's take a look at a few shots between them and see how they compare. For these tests we shot on a Sony Venice 2 in its 3x2 open gate mode at 4 different focal lengths. We've uploaded all of our tests onto our Vimeo if you want to see them in more depth. Let's start off looking at the 18mm wide open. The Nano Prime has blue-green aberration on our outer focus highlights, whereas the Supreme is more green and neutral. Flare looks more similar between the Supreme and the CP3, but the Nano Prime does look pretty close to them here. Up next are the 35mm. The Nano Prime and Supreme's bokeh looks very similar, but the Nano Prime has a bit more aberration wide open. Stopped down to T2.8, the Supreme and Nano Prime do look closer though. The CP3 does look closer to the Nano Prime, but has the most aberration out of the 3. The flares here look very similar. Looking at the 50mm, we can see that they look very close to each other. However, the Nano Prime's field of view looks a bit wide compared to the other 2. The bokeh character of the Nano Prime and Supreme is very close with similar shape, texture and aberration. The flares are where they do differ quite a bit though. The Supreme flare is much more subtle and controlled compared to the other two wide open. Stopped down to T2.8, the Supreme and Nano Prime do look much closer though. Lastly, looking at the 75mm and 85mm of the sets, we can see that they all look pretty close to each other again, with only some minor differences. The Supreme and CP3's bokeh look cleaner, but have similar character otherwise. The Supreme also looks lower contrast overall compared to the other two lenses. Stopped down, bokeh looks best shaped on the Supreme. Flaring of the Nano Prime is also very different compared to the other two, which are far closer to each other. So we can see that the lenses are different from each other, but they do have a similar look overall. I think the Supremes have the most pleasing look overall, but it's impressive how close the Nano Primes are, given their quite substantial price difference. All three lens sets will be decently easy to match together, so if you want to use Supremes as your A cam set of lenses and then the Nano Primes on a B or C cam, you'll be able to very easily. And for people wanting an image closer to the Supremes on a budget, the Nano Primes are an excellent compromise. We have a video coming up where we'll be comparing the Nano Primes to the Cooke SP3s, as I feel like they are going to be compared and contemplated between by a lot of people wanting high quality mirrorless mount cinema lenses. If you don't want to miss that, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and let us know if there are any other comparisons you want to see with these down below. When you first pick up a Nano Prime, you will instantly be reminded of the CP3. The finish and the mechanics are incredibly similar. They are solid and consistent, which is really what you should expect from Zeiss. There are currently 6 lenses in the set, an 18, 24, 35, 50, 75 and 100mm, all of which are T1.5. The 18, 75 and 100mm are all the same 112mm in length, and the 24, 35 and 50 are a touch shorter at 89mm. However, the standard 0.8 pitch gears for focus and iris are positioned consistently across the set. Given that all of the Nano Primes are T1.5 and cover full frame, they're actually reasonably compact compared to other fast full frame cinema lenses. However, they are pretty heavy and have inconsistent weights across the set, ranging from 870 grams to just over 1.25 kilograms. Their physical design is very consistent though across the set. They all share the same front diameter of 95mm for clamp-on matte boxes and an 86mm filter thread, which means you can easily use filtration whenever you need to. They all have the same 280-degree focus rotation and non-linear iris. However, the laser engraved focus markings are calibrated on a lens-by-lens basis, so marks should be accurate and consistent out of the factory. The whole set has pretty similar close focuses to Zeiss's CP3s and Supreme Primes. They aren't macro, but definitely not awful by any means. While the Nano Primes aren't necessarily the smallest cinema lenses on the market, they are decently compact given their aperture. Because of their reduced size, I can see them being used alongside Supremes and Signature Primes, or as A-camera lenses on cameras like the FX6, FX9 or Burano. These are definitely not tiny lenses though. Some of them are quite large and heavy compared to other mirrorless mount cinema lenses on the market. If you can handle them in a handheld rig will depend on what you prefer, but because of their size, focus throw and physical design, they do feel more designed for crew-based workflows than for solo operators. If you want to keep up with the latest and greatest kit, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you want to buy anything you see in this video, or you want to get your hands on the Zeiss Nano Primes or any other kit for that matter, head over to cvp.com where our experienced team is waiting to help you. The Nano Primes feature a user interchangeable mount system which is excellent to use, and this is something that we've come to expect from Zeiss. As of the release of this video, the Nano Primes are only available in Sony E-mount. This is a shame, as I think making these lenses as flexible as possible would have been a big positive for them. Sony E-mount is probably the most used mirrorless mount by filmmakers, but there are plenty of RF mount red camera users, Alexa Mini owners with M mounts, and Panasonic and Blackmagic owners with L mount. Fingers crossed this is something that Zeiss will be developing with these lenses, so other mirrorless mount camera owners can look at these for their future projects. As I said, the mount itself is user removable and shimmable. You just need the correct torques and you can easily remove the mount. This is designed slightly differently than their previous IMS system. And this is because the Nano Primes feature electronic contacts on the E-mount to allow the lenses to deliver metadata to your camera, which can be incredibly useful. While there are sensors in the lens for focus and iris data, all of the major electronics are in the mount, which is a really nice design. Interchangeable mounts with electronic connections can be fiddly to swap sometimes. But this isn't the case with the Nano Primes thanks to this new pogo connection design. If you need to shim your lens, you will find the shims that you will need to adjust here as well. If you want to learn how and why you may need to shim your lens or camera, check out the video we made all about it in the description below. Thanks to the Nano Primes active E-mount, metadata can be passed through to the camera, which can be helpful for a few different workflows. This means you get f or t-stop information depending on the camera you are using. You also get focus positional data, which is helpful when manual focusing with these lenses. Across the different Sony E-mount cameras, you will be able to enable a few different lens corrections as well, and this includes shading and chromatic aberration correction, which is great to have with manual focus cinema lenses. With E-mount cameras that have sensor stabilization, such as the Burano, the Nano Primes will feed through focal length so you don't have to adjust it manually like you would with other manual cinema primes. This is really helpful when in a more documentary or run and gun situation. They will also be fantastic for virtual production, as extended data is available when using Zeiss's Cinecraft workflow. The Nano Primes have an image circle of 46.3mm, which is large enough for most full-frame cameras. For our coverage tests, we shot some clips of our lightbox using an Alpha 1 in its stills mode so we could capture its full sensor. With them being only available in E-mount, these 3x2 full-frame stills will be one of the largest sensors you can get these onto currently, so should be a good base for us to judge their coverage. However, on projector some focal lengths cover beyond full frame, so if RF mounts do come out for them, they should cover the Raptor VV sensor well. Because of the shading correction we mentioned earlier, we grabbed these coverage examples with the corrections turned off and on so we can see the difference. With the corrections turned off, you can see some light loss towards the corners when wide open across every lens in the set, but there is no hard cutting vignette at all. When you stop down to T4, exposure becomes a lot more consistent across the frame. If we flick between the shading correction on and off, we can see a clear difference, especially with the wide open shots. Overall though, performance is good, with no hard vignetting and consistent performance, especially with corrections turned on. Right, let's take a look at some of our more controlled testing. For these, we shot using a mix of Sony's Burano and a Venice 2. Let's start taking a look at our regular bokeh headshot examples. Across the range, our out of focus highlights look pretty consistent, which is exactly what you want to see across a set of lenses. Starting with the 18mm, we can see that our out of focus highlights have a defined edge to them with a green outline. This behaviour is consistent across all of the lenses wide open, but different focal lengths do perform better across the set. The 18mm also has a touch of red fringing towards the corners, which is present even when stopped down, which the others don't have. The 50 and 75mm probably perform the best here. Each lens also suffers from misshape and bokeh across the frame wide open, with it getting more extreme towards the more telefocal lengths. As you stop down, this is improved and you can see nice shape thanks to the 12 blade iris that each lens has. Each of the lenses also has some form of texture or onion skinning in the highlights, which is consistent as you stop down, but some have it stronger than others. Overall though, with the Nano Primes being aimed at producing a nice, neutral modern image, this performance is great, and it can result in some really nice looking images that roll off nicely, but still have some detail to them without falling off too much. A lens's flare characteristic is a very subjective thing. For these examples, we've grabbed a torch and blasted it down the barrel of each lens. We tried to keep the torch in the same position, but did move the camera as we changed focal length. The flares look somewhat consistent across the range, but there are differences from focal length to focal length. The 18mm has a crazy orange circular flare, and I've actually seen this character on other wide-angle lenses before. The 24mm has this odd flaring off the main source that the others don't seem to have. The 35mm and 50mm are very well controlled. The 75mm has a similar orange circular flare to the 18mm, and the 100mm is also pretty well controlled. Let us know what you think of the flare down below. Right, let's take a look at how the lenses can resolve our chart. For these, we are using a Sony Burano and moving our camera further away from the chart to try and match framing as much as we can. Starting with the 18mm, we can see a bit of blue aberration across the frame when wide open. At T2, the lens really bites up with only a touch of green aberration left and a jump up in resolving power. At T2.8, this green aberration is gone in the centre, but there is still a little bit of aberration in the corners of frame. Stopping down from here, you can see a clear improvement in resolution, especially in the corners. The 24mm in the centre of the frame looks good. It resolves well with only a little bit of aberration. Stopping down improves this and reduces the aberration. In the corners it is quite soft and there is clear yellow and blue aberration present which stays even when stopped down. However, resolution clearly improves as you stop down, with it performing well from T4 onwards. Up next is the 35mm. Wide open, it's very clean with good resolving performance in the centre. Wide open in the corners, you can see some colour aberration and it is softer than the centre. Stopping down improves its sharpness and aberration performance, with it looking good at T5.6 across the frame. The 50mm has some pink aberration in the centre wide open, which goes as you stop down to T2. This is also present in the corners of the frame and it is also softer here as well. As you stop down to T4, it performs well with improved resolving power and colour aberration performance. The 75mm has a bit of pink aberration in the centre of frame, which is gone at T2 as well. Centre performance looks good from T2 onwards. The corners look decently clean but are soft wide open, though they do improve as you stop down, performing well from T2.8. Lastly, we have the 100mm. In the centre it has a touch of pink aberration when focused to resolve the best. This improves it around T4 or 5.6. Resolution also improves as you get to around T2.8. This is also the case in the corners of frame. Each lens has clear axial CA which is similar across them all. It's pink before your point of focus and green behind. And this is the aberration that we can see clearly in some of our creative examples. Right, let's take a look at some focus breathing tests. For these, I am pulling focus through the entire focus range, so this will look exaggerated versus a real-world focus pull scenario. Each lens does have some focus breathing, with the 18mm looking to behave the best and the 50mm looking to have the most out of the set. Looking at our grid, we can evaluate the lens's distortion characteristics. These were shot on a Sony Murano with lens corrections turned on. On the 18mm we can see slight barrel distortion, the 24mm has less barrel distortion, the 35mm looks well corrected, the 50 and 75mm have slight pincushion distortion, and the 100mm has slightly more pincushion distortion. Overall though, they perform pretty well with minimal distortion across the set. For our colour shift tests, we shot the same grey card in the same position under the same lights using the same camera and settings in the centre of our frame. We then normalise all the clips using the raw parameters in Resolve and noted down the different readings. The 35mm looks to differ the most, but they are decently matched across the range, which is good. In the real world, this would be very minimal and easy to correct the differences. The Nano Primes are a logical next step for Zeiss to make. They have always been in the conversation across the spectrum of cinema glass, so them coming out with Mirrorless Mount cinema primes isn't a surprise. And they have done a great job at capturing some of the magic of the Supreme primes in these more affordable and manageable primes. I do wish though that they were a bit more tailored for the solo operator or small crew market that they are aimed at. This could have been done with creating a slightly different physical and mechanical design, like how Cooke did with their SP3s. The long focus rotation and weight does make focusing them by hand challenging sometimes, but for more crew-based work, these will operate excellently. Their image is clean and versatile, making them a great choice for owner-operators wanting an image close to the Supremes which can be used across a range of different productions. Be that corporate to more arty productions with the help of filtration and post-production tools. At release they are priced at £20,000 for the 6-lens set, which comes with a nice custom case for them as well. They will also be available singularly for £3,500 for the 24, 35, 50 and 75, or £4,000 for the 18 and 100mm. Lenses are always an incredibly personal choice, so if you are seriously considering buying these or any other lenses, I would really suggest reaching out to us to book a demo today where you can come into our offices and get your hands on the lenses yourself so you can properly test them. Details about how to do that are down below. Anyway, let us know what you think of the Zeiss Nano Primes. If you have any further questions, down in the comments below. And if you like the video, please give it a like and maybe consider subscribing so you don't miss out on our awesome upcoming content. And thank you so much for watching.